The novel The Shining was published in 1977 and was the second novel of King's to get adapted to the big screen. This time around, Stanley Kubrick was directing, and while at first King was ecstatic, he would soon become discontent with the final product. The movie stars Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. Hey guys, and welcome back to Garage Stephen-King-a-thon, where every day for the month of October, we revisit a Stephen King movie, and this is the sophomore Stephen King movie, and a very good one at that. This is The Shining by Stanley Kubrick. So let's talk about the behind-the-scenes drama first, before we dive into the movie itself. Who was Stanley Kubrick at the time of making this film? Stanley Kubrick was already cemented as a masterful, classic filmmaker, even prior to making this film. He made films like Barry Lyndon, Clockwork Orange, 2001: A Space Odyssey. All of those were basically instant classics. Imagine you're Stephen King, and you recently found out that your movie, Carrie, was going to be directed by the great Brian De Palma. And shortly thereafter that, you go from being this broke, almost homeless, getting these dead-end jobs, and then you find out that Stanley Kubrick, the great filmmaker, is going to be adapting one of your books. So obviously, Stephen King must have been over the moon about this decision. Well, shortly thereafter, he fell on bad terms with Stanley Kubrick. Now, Stanley Kubrick is notorious for being a filmmaker who's very particular, a very borderline OCD kind of personality, which is why his movies have such a perfectionist vibe to them, and which is why he's considered one of the great filmmakers of all time. However, they had some fundamental differences in what the story of The Shining was about. The Shining, to Stephen King, was very similar to his other works. It was dealing with the theme of abuse, of addiction. Jack Torrance in the novel was an alcoholic, and that was very apparent. However, that's not what drew Stanley Kubrick to this novel. What drew Stanley Kubrick to this novel was the fact that anyone can be a monster. Anyone can be crazy. This isn't particular to anyone. At the beginning of the film, the owners of the Overlook Hotel are warning Jack Torrance that something a little fishy can go on in here, and there's this really traumatic past that comes with this hotel. Jack Nicholson laughs at it, he brushes it off, he's like, whatever, but slowly and surely this starts becoming a reality for him and his family. That's what Stanley Kubrick thought was interesting about The Shining, and especially in an era coming off of the 70s, where the bad guys seem to be people like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre and all of these big, monstrous villains. Stanley Kubrick wanted to make a horror movie where it could happen to the most normal-ass American family. And that was the fundamental difference between Stanley Kubrick's vision and Stephen King's vision, in my opinion anyway. Obviously, this movie takes a lot of liberties, strays a lot from the books, but Stephen King has been okay with that in other adaptations of his books. He doesn't really care about that. Stephen King strikes me as the kind of person who really doesn't like it when you change the overall message or theme of the movie. One thing that highlights what I'm talking about is I was reading up on this conversation Kubrick had with King prior to making this film, and Kubrick was basically telling Stephen King that ghosts are optimistic to him. He likes the thought of there being ghosts among us because it basically implies that we are immortal. Now, when Stephen King heard this, he was kind of confused, which most of us would be. Ghosts are terrifying to most of us, and for Stephen King, ghosts are reoccurring in his novels. So that was the first giant misstep in the adaptation here. That's not to say Stanley Kubrick's vision is wrong. I like the fact that you can read Stephen King's book and watch Stanley Kubrick's movie and get two different outcomes, two different feelings from watching each one. You can tell that Stanley Kubrick really feels like the possibility of ghosts can immortalize humans. When we see that bar sequence, what is usually a trope in horror movies is that a scene like that would be very terrifying and very haunting. But when Stanley Kubrick has that bar sequence with Jack Nicholson, there's a romantic feel to it. It's almost like you want to be there, even though it's amongst ghosts. It's almost like the other side is better than what we're living in now. Demonstrating that theme of how normal people are capable of evil. One way Stanley Kubrick goes by demonstrating that is by the casting. Jack Nicholson is a very charismatic actor. He was in movies like The Last Detail, and he was always known for being this kind of goofball, fun, charismatic actor. He wanted Jack Nicholson, but the studio was a little skeptical at first given that. But basically, his argument to appease to the studios was he was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. He basically played a crazy guy in that movie, therefore he can play a crazy guy in my movie. But the casting of Jack Nicholson was a subversion. He wanted this charismatic actor to be this very terrifying villain. Same thing with the casting of Shelley Duvall here. Shelley Duvall is a very innocent kind of actress. She was Olive Oil in the Popeye movie. That's the other movie with Shelley Duvall that comes to mind. But she's a very kind, soothing kind of actress. And same thing with the kid. The kid is a very lovable kid. And this what seems to be a perfect family is in fact what becomes the monster in this story. The costumes as well really portray that. Shelley Duvall's costume in here almost looks like a host of a kid's show. It's just like this very friendly kind of looking costumes. These bright reds and bright blues, and same thing with the kid. Very bright colors going on here. Stanley Kubrick's cinematography is immaculate, especially considering the time this movie was made. One shot that I like in particular is that infamous axe sequence where Jack Nicholson is trying to break down the door behind which Shelley Duvall is hiding, and the camera follows Jack Nicholson's axe as he swings and slams into that door. Beautiful shot in my opinion. Shots of the Overlook Hotel where the camera is sweeping across the Overlook Hotel, following the kid on the bicycle as he bikes around the hotel, and that reveal of the two twins. The cinematography in this movie is very, very beautiful. Stanley Kubrick also creates a lot of suspense and a lot of horror just by ambiguity. It's not about what the movie shows you, it's about what the movie doesn't show you. The dog sequence where you see this guy dressed as a fucking furry giving some other guy a blowjob, and it's just there for almost like 2-3 seconds, and you're just like, what the fuck did I just see? That is more terrifying than had they explained the backstory behind it. And that might have been also what pissed Stephen King off, was the fact that Stephen King created this universe, and stuff that he created were just in the film for 4 seconds. But I feel like that's kind of what you need to do in a film, because having a more visual medium makes it so that the thing that we're scared of is less scary the more we see it. I can understand where Stanley Kubrick was coming from here. Overall, I don't know what to say about The Shining that hasn't been said before. It's a horror classic, probably the first epic horror movie. One might say it's The Exorcist, and while I agree The Exorcist is a masterclass in horror filmmaking, this is truly an epic movie. The beautiful cinematography, the beautiful wide shots, the performances, everything feels almost like Shakespearean in its presentation, even though it's a horror movie, which is why to me The Shining is the first epic horror movie, which is something we don't throw around for horror much, the term epic. But this is truly an epic movie. Now, is it my favorite Stanley Kubrick movie? No, I think if I had to do a top 3 Stanley Kubrick movies, it would be, in no particular order, Clockwork Orange, Eyes Wide Shut, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. And to me, I put those top 3 at the very top of not only Stanley Kubrick's filmography, but just at the very top of cinema in general. However, right below that would be movies like Full Metal Jacket and The Shining and Barry Lyndon. Along the same lines, is this the best Stephen King movie? In my opinion, no. I still prefer Carrie. I think Carrie just has a bit of those tropes that I like more in movies. The use of giallo cinema, the colorful cinematography, the music. It just is a little bit more up my alley, something I prefer a little bit more. Though, I'm definitely in the minority on this. 99% of people prefer The Shining over Carrie, but hey, that's just my opinion. Get over it, folks. Alright, stay tuned, guys. Tomorrow, another Stephen King movie coming up. This one is going to be a little more interesting because it's not really based off a prior Stephen King novel. Wink, 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 wink. A little foreshadow going on. There we go. See ya, folks.
Come and play with us.